The crystal chandelier above cast dancing shadows across 300 stunned faces as my son Ryan's voice thundered through the reception hall. "Get out, Mom! My fiancé doesn't want you here." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. I stood there in my emerald evening gown, the one I'd saved 6 months to afford, feeling every pair of eyes burning into my back. Madison smirked behind her cathedral veil, her victory complete. I walked toward those mahogany doors with my head high, knowing what neither of them realized, that this lavish ranch venue, the gourmet catering, even the honeymoon suite they'd retire to tonight, all belonged to me. The next morning, when Ryan called demanding the ranch keys, I delivered 4 words that would destroy his world. "Check your prenup, son." I never imagined I'd become one of those mothers with a cautionary tale about their children. My name is Dawn, and at 67, I thought I'd seen enough of life's cruelties when my husband Daniel died in that construction accident. Ryan was only 8 years old, clutching his father's hard hat at the funeral, promising he'd be the man of the house. That little boy with gap teeth and scraped knees became my entire universe. The insurance money barely covered the funeral. Our small farm in Montana faced foreclosure notices that arrived like clockwork every month. While other widows might have crumbled, I transformed our struggling wheat fields into something extraordinary. I started small, offering horseback riding lessons to local kids hosting birthday parties in our old barn. Within 2 years, I'd converted our 200 acres into Rolling Hills Ranch Resort. I missed my own mother's funeral to close the deal with a hotel chain that saved us from bankruptcy. I remember standing in that boardroom, my black dress hidden under a blazer, negotiating contracts, while my siblings buried our mother 3 states away. Ryan needed stability more than I needed to grieve. That was my first sacrifice of many. My boy excelled at everything he touched. Valedictorian at Jefferson High, full scholarship to Stanford Law Review editor. Teachers whispered words like gifted and exceptional, though some mentioned he could be calculating when it served him. I dismissed those concerns as jealousy. What mother doesn't defend her child against the world's harsh judgments? I funded everything without hesitation. When Ryan needed a car for internships, I bought him a BMW. When he wanted to join the most expensive fraternity, I wrote the check. Bar exam preparation courses that cost more than most people's annual salary, I paid without blinking. Every sacrifice felt like an investment in his future, our future. 3 years ago, everything changed. Ryan brought her home for Thanksgiving. Madison Hartwell, 25, to his 32 with honey blonde hair and eyes that never quite smiled, even when her mouth did. She worked in public relations, she said, though her business cards were vague about which firm. Her father had been a banker before some scandal I couldn't quite pin down sent him into early retirement. The isolation started subtly. Sunday dinners became impossible due to Madison's food allergies that seemed to change weekly. Birthday celebrations got rescheduled until they disappeared entirely. Whenever I'd drive the 3 hours to visit Ryan's city apartment, Madison would orchestrate some emergency, a friend's crisis, a work deadline, a sudden illness that required Ryan's immediate attention elsewhere. My accountant brother Frank noticed irregularities before I did. "Don Ryan's been accessing your business accounts more frequently," he warned over coffee one morning. "These transfers don't look like the usual help you give him." Gloria, my best friend since high school, was more direct. "That girl's got her claws in deep. Ryan's different, colder, more calculating. When's the last time he called just to check on you?" I couldn't answer because I'd stopped counting the days. The engagement happened on Madison's timeline, quick, decisive, with a proposal she clearly orchestrated. Ryan used his grandmother's ring, the one I'd saved from the pawn shop, working 3 consecutive jobs after Daniel's death. Madison's disgust was palpable when she saw the modest diamond. "It's so vintage," she said, which in her vocabulary meant worthless. Ryan, honey, your colleagues will judge us by this ring. We need something that reflects who you are now, not where you came from. Within a week, Ryan had charged $50,000 to my credit card for a new ring. When I questioned the expense, he grew defensive. You always said you'd do anything for my happiness, Mom. Was that just talk? The conversation ended with me apologizing, though I couldn't quite remember what for. It was Patricia Chen, my estate lawyer, who first mentioned something troubling during a routine document review. Dawn, I'm seeing some interesting activity with your business registrations. Ryan's been filing paperwork listing himself as co-owner of several ventures. My stomach dropped, but my heart refused to believe it. This was my son, the boy who'd helped me plant our first garden, who'd cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke his heart. Surely there was an explanation. Then Eduardo, my ranch manager for 15 years, knocked on my office door one evening with security footage. Senora Dawn, I don't want to cause trouble, but you need to see this. The grainy video showed Madison in our business office at 2 a.m. photographing contracts and financial documents. But what made my blood run cold was seeing Ryan beside her keeping watch. My perfect son, my golden boy, was helping his fiancée steal from me. I sat in my office chair long after Eduardo left, staring at the photo on my desk, Ryan at his law school graduation beaming with pride as I adjusted his cap. When did that bright-eyed young man become someone who could betray his own mother? The evidence mounted over the following weeks. Business contacts I'd cultivated for decades suddenly received calls from Madison Hartwell events, offering the same services I provided, but promising younger energy and fresh perspectives. The caller ID showed my office number. The email signatures included my client list. They weren't just planning to push me out, they were using my own reputation to build their empire while dismantling mine. But the most painful discovery came from my banker, Harold Morrison, who'd known Ryan since he was in diapers. Dawn, I thought you should know Ryan's been in here asking about power of attorney procedures. Says you're showing signs of memory problems that the family needs to prepare. I hadn't forgotten a single detail in my 67 years, but my son was laying the groundwork to have me declared incompetent. That night I stood on my ranch's wraparound porch, watching the sun set over the mountains I'd worked so hard to keep. The wedding was 6 months away, and I finally understood the truth. This wasn't just about Madison corrupting my son. Ryan had chosen this path, and I was nothing more than an obstacle to his ambitions. But if my boy thought his mother would go quietly into that good night, he'd forgotten who raised him. I built this empire from nothing, survived widowhood and poverty, and turned a failing farm into a destination resort. I walked inside and called Frank. I need you to quietly audit everything, and I mean everything. The war for my legacy had begun, and I intended to win. 6 months before the wedding, Madison established her dominion over every detail with surgical precision. I discovered this when I arrived at what I thought was our first planning meeting, only to find Madison surrounded by binders, fabric samples, and a wedding coordinator who looked at me like I was crashing a private party. "Oh, Dawn," Madison said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I thought Ryan told you we've got everything handled. We wouldn't want to burden you with all these details." The coordinator, a sharp-faced woman named Vivian, didn't even glance up from her tablet. "We've already selected the vendors, Mrs. Mitchell. Madison has such exquisite taste. Every suggestion I made met with immediate dismissal. The local florist who'd done arrangements for our ranch events for 20 years, too provincial. The baker who'd made Ryan's birthday cake since childhood, not sophisticated enough for our guest list. The venue selection became our first major battle. Madison insisted on the Rosewood Country Club, a pretentious establishment that charged $20,000 just to reserve the space. When I offered Rolling Hills Ranch 200 acres of manicured gardens, mountain views, and a reception hall I'd renovated specifically for grand events, Madison's response cut deep. "A barn wedding." She laughed, actually laughed, in front of Ryan's law firm partners at a dinner party. "Dawn, sweetie, we're not having a hoedown. This is a society wedding." Ryan sat silent through her mockery, studying his wine glass like it contained the secrets of the universe. The guest list negotiations revealed the depth of their scheme. Madison allocated 250 invitations to her family's social circle, a collection of her father's former banking associates, her mother's garden club, and various hangers-on who seemed to exist solely to attend events. My allocation 20 seats. "But I have 4 siblings," I protested during one particularly heated discussion. "And there's your father's family, Ryan. The cousins you grew up with." "Space limitations," Madison interrupted. "You understand. We've already had to cut some of my sorority sisters." She hadn't cut anyone. I later found the full guest list accidentally left on Ryan's laptop. Madison's third cousins twice removed made the cut, while my own brother Frank was listed as maybe if space allows. The dress shopping incident still makes my hands shake with rage when I remember it. Madison had texted me the wrong time deliberately, I now realize. When I arrived at Bella's bridal, I saw them through the window: Madison, her mother Barbara, her Aunt Cecilia, and 4 cousins I'd never met, champagne flutes raised in a toast. Madison wore my grandmother's wedding dress, the one I'd preserved in acid-free tissue for 40 years, promising it to Ryan's bride. Except it wasn't recognizable anymore. They'd cut the train, removed the sleeves, replaced the delicate pearl buttons with rhinestone lacing. 3 generations of Mitchell women had worn that dress intact, and Madison had butchered it in an afternoon. I stood on the sidewalk, rain beginning to fall, watching them celebrate the destruction of my family heirloom. When Madison spotted me through the glass, she smiled and waved with mock surprise. I turned away before she could see the tears. The catering served as Madison's cruelest betrayal. For 30 years, I'd built a reputation as Montana's premier event chef. Governors had requested my elk tenderloin. Food Network had featured my huckleberry reduction. But at the rehearsal dinner, Madison orchestrated a public humiliation I'll never forget. She'd insisted I prepare samples of potential reception dishes. I spent 3 days perfecting my signature items: herb-crusted lamb, wild mushroom risotto, my famous chocolate soufflé that required 4 hours of precise timing. The rehearsal dinner guests included food critics, local restaurateurs, and social media influencers Madison had specifically invited. Madison took a theatrical bite of the lamb, her face contorting in exaggerated disgust. She spat it into her napkin, actually spat while gasping for water. "Oh my God," she announced to the horrified audience. "I think the meat's gone bad. Dawn, when did you prepare this?" The lamb was perfect. I'd selected it myself that morning, prepared it exactly as I had for countless 5-star events. But Madison continued her performance, clutching her stomach, suggesting we might need to call a doctor. "I'm so sorry, everyone," she said, voice trembling with fake concern. "We'll obviously be hiring professional caterers. I had no idea Dawn's skills had declined so much." Professional caterers, my skills, as if I hadn't catered events for half the state's elite. Ryan finally spoke, but not in my defense. "Mom, maybe Madison's right. We should leave this to the professionals. You've been seeming tired lately." Tired. The seed of their incompetence narrative planted in front of witnesses. I drove home that night with my carefully prepared food untouched in the back seat. Eduardo found me in the ranch kitchen at 3 a.m, preparing the same dishes again, desperate to prove they were perfect. "Senora, you don't need to prove anything," he said gently. "We all know your food is the best in Montana." But knowing and proving were different things when your own son participated in your public humiliation. The financial hemorrhaging accelerated after that night. Charges appeared on my accounts like mushrooms after rain. $75,000 for catering from a Seattle company, $15,000 for flowers from a boutique that specialized in exotic arrangements, $8,000 for chair rentals chairs because the ones at any venue weren't architecturally appropriate. When I tried to access my accounts to track the spending, I discovered Ryan had used a power of attorney I'd signed years ago, meant for emergencies if I was hospitalized, to add Madison as an authorized user on everything. "It's just easier this way," Ryan explained when I confronted him. "Madison's handling all the vendor payments. You wanted to be involved, and this is how you can help." Help. By funding their lavish fantasy while being systematically excluded from every decision. Frank's audit revealed the true scope of their spending $300,000 in 4 months. At this rate, they'd drain my liquid assets before the honeymoon ended. But it was Eduardo's second revelation that shifted my perspective from hurt to horror. He'd noticed unusual activity at the ranch during my business trips. Security footage showed Madison meeting with a man late at night near my office. They were photographing more than financial documents, they were documenting the ranch's layout, security systems, and safe locations. "Senora," Eduardo said carefully, "I think they're planning something bigger than a wedding." The man in the footage looked familiar, though I couldn't place him initially. Then Gloria showed me Madison's social media from 2 years prior. The same man appeared in photos labeled "My Ex Marcus." But body language doesn't lie, and theirs suggested something far more intimate than past romance. The way they moved together communicated without words, indicated long-term partners in something that had nothing to do with love. I hired James Morrison, a private investigator recommended by Patricia. What he uncovered in just 2 weeks changed everything I thought I knew about my future daughter-in-law. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, sliding a folder across my kitchen table, "Madison Hartwell isn't just after your money. She's done this before." Inside were newspaper clippings, court documents, obituaries, 2 previous engagements to wealthy men with widowed mothers. Both elderly women died unexpectedly, one from a sudden heart condition despite no history of cardiac problems, another from a fall downstairs she'd climbed daily for 40 years. Both estates went to probate. Both times Madison walked away with significant settlements as the grieving almost daughter-in-law. "There's more," James continued. "The man in your security footage, that's Marcus Hartwell. Not her ex-boyfriend, her cousin. They've been running this con together for at least 6 years. I stared at the evidence spread before me, my hands trembling. This wasn't just about money. Madison and her family were planning something permanent for me. "What about Ryan?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. James's expression softened the look of someone delivering terminal news. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell. Your son's signature appears on several documents related to Madison's previous ventures. He's been involved since law school. While I was sending care packages and tuition checks, my son was learning to destroy the women who raised boys like him. That night, I sat in Daniel's old study surrounded by photo albums documenting Ryan's childhood. There he was at 5, missing his front teeth, proud of the macaroni necklace he'd made for Mother's Day. At 10, teaching his younger cousins to ride horses. At 18, valedictorian speech notes clutched in his hands, seeking my face in the graduation crowd. When had that loving boy become a predator willing to sacrifice his own mother? I closed the albums and opened my laptop. If they wanted to play games with a woman who'd built an empire from ruins, they'd learn why underestimating a mother was the last mistake anyone should make. The wedding was 3 months away. I had work to do. Patricia Chen had been my lawyer for 20 years, handling everything from Daniel's death benefits to the ranch's incorporation. So when she called requesting an urgent meeting about estate planning, I assumed it was routine maintenance of my will. I arrived at her downtown office on a Tuesday morning, coffee in hand, completely unprepared for what she would reveal. "Dawn, before we discuss your estate updates, I need to ask about something." Patricia's usually composed demeanor showed cracks of concern. "Are you aware of the prenuptial agreement Ryan's firm is drafting?" The coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. "What prenuptial agreement?" Patricia's face went pale. She pulled out a manila folder, hesitating before sliding it across her mahogany desk. "My paralegal used to work at Ryan's firm. She thought I should see this." The document was 40 pages of dense legal text, but certain phrases leaped out like neon warnings: immediate transfer of assets upon marriage, protection from undue influence of future relationships, mental capacity evaluation triggers. My eyes blurred as I read my son's plan to legally steal everything I'd built. "This can't be legal," I whispered. "It's sophisticated," Patricia admitted. "They're not taking anything outright. They're framing it as protecting your assets from hypothetical future husbands who might take advantage of you. But look at page 23. The subsection outlined how Ryan would gain immediate control of all business operations to ensure continuity during any periods of diminished capacity. The definition of diminished capacity was broad enough to include stress, grief, or simple fatigue. More chilling was the clause stating that Madison would receive 50% of all assets if the marriage lasted just 1 year, not in case of divorce, but as a management fee for helping oversee family interests. "They're planning to declare you incompetent," Patricia said bluntly. "This prenup isn't protecting Ryan from Madison, it's protecting their joint scheme from you." I spent the next 3 hours in Patricia's office dissecting every line. The document revealed a two-pronged attack: first, establish Ryan's control through my supposed mental decline, then ensure Madison's cut regardless of their marriage's success. They'd even included provisions for my voluntary move to an assisted living facility, with the ranch being converted to better serve family interests. "What are my options?" I asked. "Depends what you're willing to do," Patricia replied. "We could challenge this openly, but that tips your hand, or we investigate further. Because, Dawn, this level of sophistication suggests they've done this before." That's how I found myself hiring James Morrison, the private investigator Patricia recommended. A former FBI agent specializing in financial crimes, James had the demeanor of someone who'd seen humanity's worst and remained grimly unsurprised. We met at a diner 2 towns over, where James laid out his initial findings. "Madison Elizabeth Hartwell has a pattern." He began spreading photos across the Formica table. 2 previous engagements, both to men with widowed mothers, both ending with the mother's unexpected death. The first victim was Eleanor Garrison, 71, of Hartford. Her son Thomas had met Madison at a charity auction. 8 months after their engagement, Eleanor died from apparent heart failure. The autopsy showed massive levels of digitalis, a heart medication Eleanor had never been prescribed. The family suspected foul play. James explained, but couldn't prove anything. Madison had Thomas convinced his mother was secretly ill and hiding it. She walked away with a settlement as the grieving fiancé. The second case was worse. Patricia Blackwood, 68, fell down the stairs in her own home, breaking her neck. She'd lived in that house 40 years without incident. The night she died, Madison and her fiancé Robert were supposedly at a restaurant 50 miles away. "Supposedly," I prompted. Credit card records show the dinner purchase, but a traffic camera caught Madison's car near the Blackwood home an hour before the 911 call." My hands shook as I studied the photos of these women. They looked like me, successful, independent, devoted to their sons. "There's more," James continued. The man you've seen with Madison Marcus Hartwell isn't her ex-boyfriend. He's her cousin, and they've been running cons together since college. The rest of James's report detailed a network of accomplices, Barbara Hartwell Madison's mother, who played the respectable society matron while casing victims' homes. Dr. Theodore Harrison, who'd lost his license in Nevada for insurance fraud, now operating under a different name and creating false medical records. Even a corrupt estate lawyer who helped draft documents designed to withstand legal challenges. But here's what changes everything, James said, pulling out one final document. Your son's connection goes deeper than you know. It was a photograph from a law conference 6 years ago. Ryan stood with Madison's father, Richard Hartwell, both holding drinks clearly familiar with each other. The metadata showed this was 2 years before Ryan supposedly met Madison randomly at a coffee shop. They recruited him. I said the words tasting like ash. The Hartwells target law students with the right profile, ambitious, flexible ethics, and most importantly, mothers with significant assets. They offer partnerships, connections, and a ready-made bride who'll help secure the fortune. I thought I might be sick right there in that diner booth. My brilliant son hadn't fallen for a manipulative woman. He'd been an eager participant from the start. James slid me a flash drive. Everything's documented here. But Mrs. Mitchell, we need to discuss your safety. These people have killed before. That evening, I discovered the true extent of their preparations. Hidden in my own home were insurance policies I'd never signed totaling $10 million with Ryan and Madison as beneficiaries. The applications included medical exams I'd supposedly undergone documenting concerning symptoms, memory lapses, confusion, chest pains. More terrifying were the medical appointments on my calendar I'd never made. According to these records, I'd been seeing Dr. Harrison for months, receiving prescriptions for heart medication that could be lethal if I didn't actually need it. The paper trail showed a woman in declining health setting the stage for an unfortunate but not unexpected death. Eduardo interrupted my research with urgent news. Senora, I found something in the feed storage. Hidden among grain bags were bottles of medication with my name on them, the same heart drugs from the false prescriptions. Someone had been adding them to the ranch's food supplies, possibly to dose me without my knowledge. How long? I asked him. The purchase dates go back 2 months. If you'd been eating regularly in the main kitchen instead of your private one. I'd been avoiding the main house lately, preferring to eat in my office suite. That instinct had possibly saved my life. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Margaret Winslow's sister to Eleanor Garrison's sister-in-law had spent years investigating her family's tragedy. Patricia connected us, and Margaret drove 8 hours to meet me. They're patient, she warned over tea in my office. They spend months building the narrative of decline. By the time something happens, everyone's been conditioned to expect it. Even family members start believing the lies. Margaret had brought boxes of evidence from her own investigation. The parallels were chilling, the same pattern of financial manipulation, medical gaslighting, and gradual isolation from support systems. But you have an advantage I didn't, she said. You know what they're planning. Eleanor never saw it coming. That night I made a decision. I wouldn't run. I wouldn't hide. I wouldn't even confront them directly yet. Instead, I'd turn their own weapon against them, patience. We're going to war, I told Patricia the next morning, but they can't know it's begun. Patricia smiled, the expression of a lawyer who'd been waiting for permission to unleash hell. Then let's discuss strategy. First, we need to protect your assets without alerting them. Over the following weeks, I quietly restructured everything. The ranch went into an irrevocable trust with my nephews as trustees. Business accounts were moved to institutions where Ryan had no relationships. I liquidated stocks and bonds, converting them to assets they couldn't trace or access. Most importantly, I began documenting everything. Every interaction was recorded. Every document was photographed. Every conversation with Madison was witnessed by employees I trusted. "You're building a case," James observed during one of our meetings. "No," I corrected. "I'm building a trap." The prenup they thought would protect them had revealed their entire plan. Now I knew their timeline, their methods, and their goal. They needed me alive until the wedding to maintain appearances, then, shortly after, to avoid suspicion. They'd counted on my maternal blind spot to keep me vulnerable. But they'd made one crucial error. They'd given me time to prepare. I played my part perfectly in the weeks that followed. When Madison commented on my confusion at a family dinner, I agreed I had been feeling scattered. When Ryan suggested I see a doctor for my fatigue, I promised to make an appointment. I even left fake medical reports where Madison would find them, indicating a hereditary condition that could cause sudden death. Let them think their plan was working. Let them believe I was a naive old woman walking into their trap. Because while they plotted my demise, I was orchestrating theirs. The transformation began on a Thursday morning 3 months before the wedding. I knocked on Madison's apartment door with a peace offering homemade coffee cake and an apology I'd rehearsed until it sounded genuine. "I've been thinking," I said, watching Madison's suspicious face peer through the barely open door. "I haven't been fair to you. You're going to be my daughter-in-law, and I've been acting like a jealous mother." Madison's eyes narrowed, searching for the trap. Finding none, she opened the door wider. "I want to start over." I continued offering the cake with practiced humility. "Ryan loves you, and that should be enough for me." The calculation in Madison's eyes was visible, weighing risks against benefits. Finally, her face shifted into false warmth. "Oh, Dawn, I'm so glad you've come around. I've been telling Ryan you'd accept our relationship eventually." Within a week, I'd become the model future mother-in-law. I publicly deferred to Madison's wedding decisions, praised her taste at family gatherings, and even suggested she take over planning the ranch's summer gala, my signature event for 15 years. "You have such modern ideas," I gushed at a wedding shower thrown by Madison's friends. "I've probably been stuck in my ways too long." Madison preened under the attention, boasting to her circle about taming the dragon. What she didn't notice were the 7 women at that shower who weren't her friends at all, but former victims and relatives Margaret Winslow had helped me locate. We called ourselves the Phoenix Network Women, who'd been targeted by similar schemes and survived, or who'd lost family members to these predators. Margaret had spent 3 years finding us through court records, obituaries, and private investigators. Now we had a shared mission, stopping Madison and her family permanently. "She's using the same playbook," whispered Catherine Morrison, whose aunt had died mysteriously after her son's engagement to a woman matching Madison's pattern. The gradual poisoning, the mental competency angle, even the same lawyer in Nevada who creates the documents. Each woman brought pieces of evidence they'd collected: photographs, recordings, financial documents. Together, we built a comprehensive picture of the Hartwell family's decade-long crime spree across 8 states. While Madison basked in her apparent victory over me, I executed my own plans with surgical precision. The ranch transfer to an irrevocable trust happened quietly, with documents backdated to before I'd ever met Madison. My business interests were restructured through a series of shell companies that would take forensic accountants years to untangle. "You're being paranoid," Ryan said when he noticed some changes during a rare visit. "Why all this complicated paperwork?" "Tax benefits," I replied smoothly. "Frank suggested it could save us hundreds of thousands. More money for your future children." The mention of grandchildren always distracted Ryan from financial scrutiny, a weakness I'd noted and now exploited. The performance required constant vigilance. At Sunday dinner, I'd accidentally use the wrong names for guests, then laugh it off as a senior moment. During wedding planning sessions, I'd agree to everything Madison suggested, occasionally asking her to repeat things as if I hadn't understood the first time. "Your mother's really struggling," I overheard Madison tell Ryan one evening. "I found her in the garden yesterday talking to your father like he was still alive." I had been talking to Daniel, telling him about our son's betrayal and asking for strength, but Madison's interpretation served my purposes perfectly. Dr. Patricia Stevens, my actual physician for 20 years, was briefed on the situation. "If anyone requests your medical records, you call me immediately," she instructed. "I've added security protocols to your file. No information releases without your personal authorization." Meanwhile, I wore a wire to every family gathering. The FBI had become interested in the Hartwell operation after James submitted evidence of interstate fraud and potential murders. Agent Sarah Coleman, assigned to the case, taught me how to bait conversations toward admissions. "The technology's come a long way," she explained, showing me a device that looked like a simple brooch. "Just act naturally and let them talk. Criminals love to brag, especially when they think they're winning." Madison proved Agent Coleman right. During a spa day I'd suggested for bonding, she grew careless after too much champagne. "You know what I love about Ryan," she said during our pedicures. "He's so practical about family obligations. He understands that sometimes for the greater good, difficult decisions must be made." "Difficult decisions," I prompted, keeping my voice mild. "About the future, about who's capable of managing assets and who needs assistance transitioning to retirement." "You mean like a nursing home?" Madison laughed. "Oh, Dawn, there are much more permanent solutions than nursing homes. Ryan and I have discussed how we'd handle things if you became unable to manage your affairs. Every word recorded, every admission cataloged." The network of Madison's accomplices slowly revealed itself. Dr. Harrison visited the ranch under the pretense of being a wedding guest's +1, but I caught him photographing my medication bottles in the bathroom. Barbara Hartwell volunteered to help with flower arrangements while mentally cataloging entry points and security weaknesses. Marcus played the role of concerned ex-boyfriend, showing up at ranch events to check on Madison's happiness while actually surveying our routines. "They're getting bolder," Eduardo reported. "Last night someone tried to access the main safe. The alarm scared them off, but they'll try again." I'd moved everything valuable from that safe months ago, leaving only fake documents showing massive debts and liens against the property. Let them think they were inheriting problems instead of prosperity. The Phoenix Network met monthly at rotating locations, sharing intelligence and refining our plans. Eleanor Garrison's sister-in-law had connected us with a documentary filmmaker interested in exposing romance fraud targeting elderly women. Catherine Morrison's contacts in banking helped us trace the Hartwell family's financial networks. Even Margaret's elderly mother, 91, and sharp as a tack, contributed by infiltrating online widow support groups where the Hartwells trolled for victims. "They have a script," she reported. "The men always claim their mothers are difficult, that the new wife is trying so hard to be accepted. They paint a picture of the lonely, bitter mother-in-law to justify what happens later." 3 weeks before the wedding, I made my boldest move. I scheduled a lunch with Richard Hartwell Madison's father at the country club he frequented. I wanted to discuss our children's future. I said, watching him assess me over his martini. "I believe in being practical about family wealth." Richard's eyes sharpened. Here was the conversation he'd been waiting for, the matriarch ready to negotiate her own demise. "What did you have in mind?" he asked carefully. "I'm not naive about what Madison brings to this union," I continued. "The Hartwell name carries weight even after your setbacks, but Ryan's inheritance requires careful management." "Of course, Madison's very capable with finances." "I'm sure. That's why I want to propose a partnership. I'll sign over controlling interest in my businesses, but gradually to avoid tax implications. In exchange, I want guarantees about my living situation." Richard leaned forward. "What kind of guarantees?" "A comfortable retirement. Perhaps abroad where the climate's better for my arthritis. Somewhere quiet where I won't interfere with the young couple." I watched him calculate, was I offering to disappear voluntarily, saving them the trouble of a murder? His greed won over caution. "That could be arranged. Madison knows lovely facilities in Costa Rica. Very exclusive, very discreet. Facilities, not homes or communities. Facilities where inconvenient mothers-in-law could vanish without questions." "I'll have my lawyer draw up papers," I said. "No need. We have excellent lawyers who specialize in family transitions." Of course they did. The same lawyers who'd helped other mothers disappear permanently. That night, I added Richard's recorded admissions to our growing collection of evidence. The FBI agent was particularly interested in the Costa Rica connection. "We've been tracking suspicious deaths at several facilities there," Agent Coleman explained. "American women who enter relatively healthy and die within months. Their families back home are told it was natural causes, and cremation happens before anyone can investigate." The scope of the operation was staggering. This wasn't just about Madison and Ryan, it was an entire network targeting vulnerable women across the country. 2 weeks before the wedding, Madison made her move. She arrived at the ranch with Dr. Harrison and 2 other men in medical coats. "Dawn, we're worried about you," she said, all false concern. "Ryan asked us to do a wellness check. You've been so forgetful lately." I played my part, perfectly confused but cooperative, struggling with simple questions, grateful for their care. Dr. Harrison performed tests designed to fail documenting symptoms I didn't have. "We should probably start planning for extra support," he concluded, "just in case things progress." After they left, I called Agent Coleman. "They're escalating. How much more do you need?" "We're close. The wedding will be our opportunity to get everyone in one place. Can you hold out until then?" 2 more weeks of pretending my mind was slipping. 2 more weeks of letting them believe they'd won. I stood on my porch that night watching stars Daniel and I used to name after our dreams. The ranch spread before me, proof that a widow's determination could build empires from ashes. Madison thought she was stealing from a weak old woman. Ryan believed he was outsmarting the mother who'd sacrificed everything for him. They were both about to learn why you should never underestimate a woman who'd already survived the worst life could offer. The wedding was in 14 days. The trap was set. All that remained was springing it. The morning of Ryan's wedding dawned crisp and clear, one of those perfect Montana days that made our mountains look painted against the sky. I stood at my bedroom window watching the circus arrive at my ranch. Madison had finally agreed to use the venue not from sentiment, but because she believed she'd own it within days. I dressed carefully in the emerald gown I'd worn to every major event since Daniel's funeral, adding the pearl necklace he'd given me on our 10th anniversary. My hands were steady as I applied lipstick and fixed my silver hair into an elegant chignon. Today required the performance of a lifetime. The wedding gift I'd prepared sat on my dresser, a leather-bound photo album I'd spent weeks assembling. To any casual observer, it contained touching memories of Ryan's childhood. But hidden behind each photograph was evidence contracts he'd forged, recordings of Madison's admissions, copies of the false medical records they'd created. Even the binding contained a flash drive with everything the FBI needed. "Senora Dawn." Eduardo knocked softly. "The photographer wants family pictures in 30 minutes. "Tell them I'll be there," I replied, tucking the album under my arm. The ranch had been transformed into Madison's vision of elegance. $10,000 in white roses, crystal chandeliers hanging from temporary structures, chairs wrapped in silk that cost more than most people's monthly wages. She'd spent my money like water, believing the well would never run dry. I found the bridal suite bustling with Madison's court. Her mother Barbara guarded the door like a sentinel, while cousins I'd never met sipped champagne from bottles that cost $800 each. Madison stood at the center in a $30,000 dress, being fawned over by stylists who charged by the minute. "Dawn." Madison's voice dripped false sweetness. "Don't you look appropriate for your age? I'm so glad you decided against trying to match our color scheme." Her bridesmaids tittered on cue. I smiled serenely, extending the album. "I wanted to give you this privately," I said. "It's photos of Ryan growing up, but also some family documents you should have. Property deeds, business contracts, that sort of thing, for safekeeping." Madison's eyes lit with barely concealed greed as she flipped through pages, not realizing she was holding her own conviction in her manicured hands. "How thoughtful," she purred. "I'll treasure this." During the photography session, I noticed Madison's family positioning themselves strategically. Marcus lingered near the gift table where envelopes of cash were accumulating. Barbara stationed herself by the exit to the parking lot. Two cousins I didn't recognize seemed very interested in the security camera locations. Mom, you're standing in the wrong spot," Ryan snapped as we posed for what should have been a tender mother-son portrait. "The light's all wrong on your face." 25 years of sacrifice, and he worried about lighting instead of the woman who'd raised him. I moved obediently, maintaining my facade of confusion. The ceremony took place in the garden I'd planted with my own hands, where Ryan had taken his first steps between the rose bushes. 300 guests filled white chairs, Madison's social climbing acquaintances, Ryan's law firm colleagues who whispered about his rapid partnership track, and my allotted 20 family members who looked distinctly uncomfortable among the pretension. As I was escorted to my seat, I noticed the Phoenix Network members scattered throughout the crowd. Margaret sat with the prosecution lawyers she'd contacted. Catherine had brought her journalist friend. Even Eleanor Garrison's nephew, now a federal judge, had accepted his invitation. They all waited for my signal. The music swelled as Madison appeared at the garden entrance, her father Richard walking her down an aisle strewn with orchid petals. She looked radiant in the way cobras look, beautiful, deadly grace wrapped in designer silk. Ryan waited at the altar, his face showing the satisfied expression of a man about to close a lucrative deal. When had my baby become this calculating stranger? The minister, unaware he was presiding over a criminal union, began the ceremony with words about love and trust that felt like mockery. "If anyone objects to this union," he intoned, "speak now or forever hold your peace." I remained silent. My objection would come later with interest. The reception erupted in Madison's carefully orchestrated grandeur. A 12-piece band played while guests dined on the $75,000 catering she'd insisted upon. I watched her family work the room, Marcus charming elderly guests while checking their jewelry, Barbara engaging in conversations designed to extract financial information. During cocktail hour, I overheard Dr. Harrison speaking with one of Madison's aunts. "The evaluation went perfectly. Within 6 months, we can have her declared incompetent. The paperwork's already drafted." 6 months. They were giving me 6 months before attempting to steal my life's work, and possibly my life itself. The speeches began after dinner. Madison's father spoke eloquently about family legacy and the importance of fresh blood revitalizing established traditions. The implied threat wasn't subtle. I was the old blood needing replacement. When my turn came, I rose slowly, letting them see the fragile woman they expected. The microphone felt heavy with purpose as I began. "When Ryan was 7, he found an injured hawk in our barn. He insisted on nursing it back to health, spending weeks learning about raptors, building a recovery cage, mixing special food. The day we released that hawk, Ryan cried not from sadness, but from joy at seeing something he'd saved soar free. I paused, meeting Ryan's eyes across the room. I've thought about that hawk often lately. How sometimes we nurture things that are meant to fly away. How sometimes what we think we're saving is actually a predator healing its strength to hunt again. The room grew quiet, sensing undercurrents in my words. But today isn't about old hawks. I continued, brightening my tone. It's about new beginnings, about families joining together, about trust. I raised my champagne glass. To Ryan and Madison, may you receive exactly what you deserve from this union. May every scheme, dream you've planned together come to fruition. And may you both understand that a mother's love isn't blindness, it's choosing to see clearly and love anyway. The toast landed with mixed reactions. Most guests applauded politely, but Madison's family exchanged glances. They'd heard the warning shots. As dinner concluded, Madison approached me with false concern. Dawn, that was such an interesting toast. Are you feeling all right? You seem a bit confused. Oh, I'm perfectly clear, I assured her. In fact, I've never seen things more distinctly. Her smile faltered slightly before recovering. Well, we should probably discuss those documents you gave me. Some of them seem quite valuable. All in good time, I replied. Why don't you enjoy your reception first? The dancing began, and I watched Madison work the room like a professional grifter, which essentially she was. She made sure to be photographed with the wealthiest guests, collected business cards from Ryan's colleagues' wives, and mentally calculated the value of every gift. It was during the father-daughter dance that things began unraveling. Madison had chosen Daddy's Little Girl, a saccharine choice that made Richard puff with pride. But halfway through the song, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Guests were discovering the envelopes I'd placed under their chairs, not the ones Madison expected. Inside each was a single-page A Wanted poster featuring Madison Marcus and Dr. Harrison from 3 years ago in Nevada, connected to elderly fraud. What is this? Someone gasped. Madison, still dancing, hadn't noticed the growing disturbance, but Richard had. His face went pale as he recognized the document that could destroy them. Just keep dancing, he hissed to Madison. Smile. But the dominoes had begun falling. Margaret Winslow stood up at her table, holding the poster high. This woman killed my sister-in-law, she announced. She's a murderer and a thief. The band stopped mid-note. Madison froze on the dance floor, her perfect facade cracking. That's slander, she shrieked. I'll sue you for everything. With what lawyer? Catherine Morrison stood next. The one who helped you forge my aunt's will? He's already been disbarred. More Phoenix Network members rose, each sharing their story. The room erupted in chaos as guests realized they were attending the wedding of a serial predator. Ryan rushed to Madison's defense. This is insane, Mom. Control your friends. They're not my friends, son, I said clearly. They're your victims' families. Security guards, not the ones Madison hired, but off-duty police I'd arranged, began moving toward the exits. Marcus tried to flee but found his path blocked. Barbara clutched her purse, which investigators would later find contained copies of guests' credit cards she'd photographed. You crazy old woman, Madison screamed at me, her mask completely gone. You think you've won? Ryan has power of attorney. We own everything. Actually, I said calmly, you might want to check those documents I gave you more carefully. Madison grabbed the album from the gift table, ripping it open. As she flipped through pages, her face went white. Behind every childhood photo was evidence of her crimes. The property deeds were warrants. The business contracts were FBI surveillance logs. No, she whispered. No, this isn't possible. Dawn, Elizabeth Mitchell. Agent Coleman stepped forward, badge displayed. We need to thank you for your cooperation in this investigation. The room exploded. Guests screamed, some trying to leave, others pulling out phones to record. Madison lunged at me, designer nails aimed at my face, but the agents intercepted her. "You destroyed everything," she screamed as they cuffed her. "You vindictive witch!" "I'm a mother," I replied, "and mothers protect what's theirs even from their own children." Ryan stood frozen as agents arrested Madison's entire family. His groomsmen colleagues from his firm backed away as if he were contaminated. In minutes, his career, his bride, and his schemes lay in ruins. "Mom," he said, voice cracking, "how could you do this to me?" The question, Ryan, is, how could you do this to me? To Eleanor Garrison, to Patricia Blackwood, to all the mothers you and Madison planned to destroy. The truth finally penetrated his denial. His shoulders slumped as agents approached with handcuffs. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "part of me did love you." "The part I raised did," I agreed. "But that boy died the day you chose greed over family." As they led him away, I stood in my garden surrounded by chaos, overturned chairs, abandoned champagne, the detritus of a criminal empire collapsed. The mountains watched impassively, having seen worse storms than this. Eduardo appeared at my elbow. "Senora, are you all right?" "I will be," I said, watching the police cars disappear down my ranch road. "Tomorrow we clean up. Tonight I mourn my son." But I didn't mourn alone. The Phoenix Network surrounded me, women who understood the price of justice. We sat in my kitchen until dawn, sharing stories and strength bonded by survival. The wedding that was supposed to mark my destruction had become my liberation. The complete dismantling of Madison and Ryan's criminal enterprise began exactly 17 minutes after the first arrest. As police cars filled with the wedding party wailed down my ranch road, I stood in the wreckage of the reception with the Phoenix Network, watching years of planning culminate in perfect justice. "Check your phones," Agent Coleman announced to the stunned guests. "We've just released the preliminary details to the press." Within seconds, devices lit up with breaking news alerts. "Society wedding becomes crime scene, federal agents arrest entire wedding party in elderly fraud ring." The headline was accompanied by Madison's pristine bridal photo juxtaposed with her mugshot from Nevada. The remaining guests scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. I watched Ryan's law partners huddle in panicked conversation, no doubt calculating the damage to their firm's reputation. Madison's society friends deleted social media photos in real time, pretending they'd never known her. Gloria, my best friend who'd warned me months ago, appeared with a thermos of coffee and a grim smile. "You did it, Dawn. You actually did it." "We all did it," I corrected, gesturing to the Phoenix Network members who'd risked their own safety to expose this ring. Frank, my accountant brother, emerged from the main house with a laptop. "The financial freeze just went through. Every account Madison and Ryan accessed is locked pending investigation. The Hartwell family assets are frozen across 14 states. The scope of what we'd uncovered was staggering. Margaret Winslow had connected 43 victims across the country, 12 of whom hadn't survived their encounters with the Hartwell operation. The FBI estimated the family had stolen over $30 million through elder fraud, forged inheritances, and mysterious deaths. "Ma'am," a young officer approached nervously, "we need you to identify some evidence from your office safe." I followed him inside, where investigators were cataloging what Madison's family had tried to steal. The fake documents I'd planted were spread across my desk. The fabricated debts, the forged transfer papers, all the bait they'd swallowed whole. "They photographed everything," the officer explained. "Planned to use these to prevent you from fighting the asset transfer. Instead, they documented their own attempted theft," Agent Coleman added. "Your son was very thorough in his notes about how to use these against you." She showed me Ryan's laptop seized from his car. The files were damning detailed plans for my accidental death lists of medications that could trigger heart failure, even a timeline for declaring me incompetent. The worst part was seeing his notes from law school where professors had praised his innovative thinking about elder law. My phone rang Patricia Chen, my real lawyer. "Dawn, I'm at the courthouse with Judge Morrison. We're filing emergency injunctions against every document Ryan ever notarized regarding your assets. By morning, any power of attorney he claimed will be void." Outside, the scene grew more surreal. News vans arrived, their satellite dishes rising like mechanical flowers seeking scandal. Someone had called Madison's vendors. The florist arrived to repossess arrangements. The rental company began loading chairs and chandeliers. Within hours, the fantasy wedding would vanish like it never existed. I returned to find Eduardo organizing my ranch staff. "Senora, we've secured all entry points. No one enters without your permission." "The horses?" I asked. Madison had mentioned wanting to sell them for liability reasons. "Safe in the back pastures. Miguel's standing guard." Even my animals had been targets in their scheme. Nothing was too petty for their greed. As midnight approached, the full weight of evidence emerged. The Phoenix Network had done more than share stories. They'd built an airtight case. Catherine's journalist friend revealed she'd been investigating the Hartwells for 2 years, tracking their victims through obituaries and probate records. The documentary filmmaker had footage of Marcus casing other victims' homes. Even elderly Mrs. Patterson Margaret's 91-year-old mother had infiltrated online widow support groups where the Hartwells hunted for targets. "This is bigger than we thought," Agent Coleman admitted during an impromptu briefing in my living room. "We've connected them to a national network targeting wealthy widows. Your case broke it wide open." The television in the corner played continuous coverage. Ryan's law firm had already issued a statement distancing themselves. Madison's social media accounts were being dissected by internet sleuths who found evidence of her previous engagements, complete with eerily similar photos, always the devoted fiancé beside a wealthy man with a recently deceased or soon-to-be deceased mother. "Mrs. Mitchell." A young woman approached hesitantly. "I'm Jennifer Blackwood. Patricia Blackwood was my grandmother." Patricia Blackwood, the woman who'd died falling down her own stairs the night Madison was supposedly miles away. She knew something was wrong. Jennifer continued, tears streaming. "She tried to warn my father, but Madison had him convinced Gran was paranoid. Thank you for stopping them." One by one, family members of victims approached. Sons and daughters who'd been manipulated into betraying their own mothers. Siblings who'd watched helplessly as their inheritance disappeared into legal black holes. Each story reinforced the pattern: isolate the mother, convince the son she was declining, create medical evidence, then engineer an accident. The Costa Rica connection was crucial, Agent Coleman explained to the assembled group. "The facilities Richard Hartwell mentioned, they're not retirement homes. They're medical tourism clinics that specialize in end-of-life care for wealthy Americans. Patients check in with minor ailments and leave in urns." The room fell silent as we absorbed this horror. How many mothers had taken that one-way trip, believing they were protecting their children from the burden of their care? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Opening it, I found a message from Ryan. "You've destroyed my life. I hope you're satisfied." I showed it to Agent Coleman, who photographed it for evidence. "He still doesn't understand," she said. "In his mind, you're the villain for exposing his crimes." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd raised Ryan to be ambitious, to reach for success, to never accept limitations. Somehow those lessons had twisted into entitlement, greed, and ultimately matricide. "Ma'am, you need to see this," Frank called from the office. On his laptop screen was Madison's lawyer, not the distinguished counselor she'd claimed, but a disbarred attorney operating under aliases in multiple states. He was being arrested on live television, caught trying to flee with boxes of documents that included forged wills, fake medical directives, and power of attorney forms pre-signed and waiting for victims' names. He had templates, Frank explained in disgust. Fill-in-the-blank forms for stealing from mothers. The wedding gifts abandoned in the chaos told their own story. We found cards addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Ryan Mitchell, containing checks made out to Madison's shell companies. Even their gift registry had been a scam, items shipped directly to a warehouse the Hartwells used for reselling stolen goods. As dawn approached, the ranch felt different. Not violated, but cleansed. The detritus of Madison's false elegance littered the grounds, but underneath my home remained intact, saved by paranoia that turned out to be justified intuition. The Phoenix Network gathered on the porch, exhausted but victorious. We'd spent months in secret meetings, sharing evidence-building cases, waiting for this moment. Margaret Winslow raised a coffee mug in toast. "To the mothers who fought back," she said simply. "To the ones who didn't make it," Catherine added softly. We drank in silence, honoring the women whose deaths had made our victory possible. Eleanor Garrison, Patricia Blackwood, and too many others who'd trusted their children until the end. "What happens now?" someone asked. Agent Coleman, who joined us after hours of processing evidence, provided the answer. "Now we build the cases. With your evidence and testimony, we're looking at federal racketeering charges. The Hartwell family won't see freedom for decades." "And Ryan?" I had to ask. "Your son's cooperation will determine his sentence. If he testifies against the others, maybe 20 years. If not..." She shrugged. "He's looking at life." Life. My baby boy might spend his life in prison because he'd chosen greed over love. The sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of hope. The ranch which Madison had seen as her prize remained mine, not through legal maneuvering or clever documentation, but through the simple act of refusing to be a victim. Dawn. Gloria touched my shoulder gently. "What will you do now?" I looked at the women around me, warriors disguised as grandmothers, and knew exactly what came next. "Now," I said, "we make sure this never happens to another mother again." The Phoenix Network had exposed one ring, but we all knew more existed. Predators who saw older women as easy marks, who weaponized family love for profit. Our fight had only begun. But first I had a phone call to answer. Ryan was calling from jail, and for the first time in months, I was ready to speak my truth without pretense or performance. The wedding that was meant to be my funeral had become my resurrection. The call came at 6:47 in the morning, just as the last news van pulled away from my property. I sat at my kitchen table, still in my emerald gown from the night before, watching Ryan's name flash on my phone screen. On the fourth ring, I answered. "Mom." His voice sounded younger, stripped of the arrogant edge I'd grown accustomed to. "Mom, I need the ranch keys. Madison needs somewhere to stay. She's pregnant." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Even from a jail cell facing decades in prison, my son was still running the same con. "Check your prenup, son." Those 4 words hung between us like a blade. "What?" Confusion colored his tone. "The prenup you thought protected your scheme actually has an interesting clause," I explained calmly. "Section 37, subsection C. Any fraud perpetrated against family members voids all claims and triggers immediate disinheritance. Your lawyer friends should have caught that, but they were too busy calculating their cut of my estate." Silence. Then, "How did you know?" "Oh, Ryan, I've known since the beginning. The private investigator, the FBI, the Phoenix Network, we've been watching you for months. That prenup you had Madison sign, I had Patricia Chen draft it and slip it into your files. You signed your own confession." "You set me up." Indignation crept into his voice, the criminal angry at being out-criminalized. I protected myself from the son who plotted my murder. There's a difference. I never... He stopped, perhaps realizing his calls were being recorded. I want a lawyer. You'll have a public defender. All your assets are frozen and your law firm dropped you before Madison's wedding dress hit the evidence locker. By the way, she's not pregnant. She had her tubes tied 3 years ago. It's in her medical records from Nevada. Another silence, longer this time. I could hear other inmates in the background, the clash of metal doors, the reality of his new world setting in. Why, he finally asked. Why all of this? If you knew why, didn't you just confront me? Because you would have denied it. Madison would have played the victim. Your lawyer friends would have spun it as a jealous mother attacking her son's happiness. I needed evidence, Ryan. I needed the world to see what you truly are. What I am, his voice cracked. I'm your son. No, I said firmly. My son died somewhere between Stanford and that first meeting with Richard Hartwell. My son was the boy who saved injured hawks and cried at their freedom. You're just someone wearing his face while planning my funeral. That's not Madison convinced me you were showing signs of dementia. She had documentation medical opinions. I thought I was protecting your assets from vulnerability. Stop. My voice cut through his excuse. I have recordings from your bachelor party, Ryan. You bragged about the plan. You laughed about how easy it would be to convince people I was declining. You joked about which yacht to buy with my life insurance. The silence stretched so long I wondered if we'd been disconnected. Finally, a sound I hadn't heard in 20 years. Ryan crying. I'm sorry, he whispered. Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't even know how it happened. It started small, just helping Madison with some legal documents. Then her father offered me partnership in his firm. Before I knew it... Before you knew it, you were planning my murder. Yes, quite the slippery slope from document review to matricide. What happens now? He sounded like a child again, lost and afraid. Now you face justice. The FBI has 43 cases linked to the Hartwell network. 12 dead mothers, Ryan. 12 women who trusted their sons until the end. You'll answer for all of them. But I didn't. I never actually hurt anyone. You never got the chance. If I hadn't discovered your plan, where would I be in 6 months? Another tragic accident? Another mysterious illness? Don't pretend you weren't counting my life insurance before I was even dead. The jury will understand, he said desperately. I'll explain how Madison manipulated me, how her family recruited vulnerable law students. I was a victim too. I laughed, then harsh and bitter. A victim. You had every advantage, love, education, opportunity. I worked 18-hour days to give you choices I never had. And you chose to betray the woman who sacrificed everything for your success. If you testify for me, I'll testify, Ryan. I'll stand in that courtroom and detail every forged document, every hidden poison, every calculated cruelty. The jury will hear how my son sat across from me at Sunday dinners while planning my death. How's that for testimony? You're really going to let me rot in prison, your own son? My son would never have drugged my food. My son would never have forged medical records. My son would never have chosen money over mother. Whoever you are, you made your choice. Now live with it. Mom, please. Goodbye, Ryan. May you find in prison the conscience you lost in law school. I hung up before he could respond, my hand surprisingly steady as I set down the phone. The kitchen felt different somehow, lighter, as if releasing toxic air I hadn't realized I'd been breathing. Frank appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand. You okay? Better than I've been in years, I admitted. He tried the pregnancy sympathy card. Of course he did. Con artists always have one last play. We sat in companionable silence as the ranch woke around us. Eduardo's team was already clearing wedding debris, erasing Madison's tasteless excess from my land. In a few hours, no trace would remain of yesterday's catastrophe except freedom papers, the documents Patricia would file voiding every claim against my estate. The news coverage is going viral, Frank said, scrolling through his phone. 3 million views on the arrest video alone. Ryan's law firm is in full damage control mode. I didn't care about viral videos or public shame. My victory was simpler. I'd survived. The woman they'd marked for death was drinking coffee in her own kitchen, watching sunrise paint her mountains gold. Patricia arrived at 8 sharp with a briefcase full of legal vindication. Every forged document is void. Every power of attorney revoked. The ranch trust is ironclad. Even if Ryan somehow escaped conviction, he couldn't touch a penny. What about the other victims' families? The FBI's setting up a restitution fund. Assets seized from the Hartwell operation will be distributed among survivors. It won't bring back the dead, but it's something. Over the following weeks, the full scope of justice unfolded. Madison received 40 years without parole for racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Her cousin Marcus got 35 years. Dr. Harrison, whose real name was Theodore Whitman, received life for his role in 12 deaths. Even Barbara Hartwell, the society matron who'd played grieving mother-in-law at victims' funerals, got 25 years. Ryan, despite his lawyer's best efforts, received 30 years with possibility of parole in 20. The judge called him the worst kind of predator, one who betrays sacred trust for common greed. His legal career died with his conviction bar membership revoked in disgrace. I attended every day of the trials, sitting with the Phoenix Network as witness after witness detailed the Hartwell's cruelties. Sons who'd been manipulated into betraying mothers. Daughters who'd discovered the schemes too late. Families destroyed by greed disguised as love. The documentary premiered 6 months later, The Mother Hunters Inside America's Elder Fraud Epidemic. It won 3 Emmys and sparked federal legislation increasing penalties for elder abuse. Madison tried to sue from prison claiming defamation. The judge laughed her out of court. I used the story rights money to establish the Phoenix Foundation, offering resources for families targeted by financial predators. We created early warning systems, legal support networks, and safe houses for women escaping abusive financial situations. Within a year, we'd helped prevent 17 similar schemes across the country. The ranch thrived without Ryan's interference. I expanded our wedding venue services with background checks on all couples and their families. Eduardo became my business partner, his loyalty earning what my blood had forfeited. The Phoenix Network met monthly, our ranks growing as more survivors found courage to speak. On the 2nd anniversary of the wedding disaster, I received a letter from Ryan. His handwriting looked different, smaller, humbled by walls and time. Dear Mom, it began. I won't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I write only to say you were right. Prison has taught me what Stanford never could, that integrity matters more than income, that mothers aren't obstacles but foundations. I work in the prison library now, teaching literacy to inmates who never had the chances you gave me. It's not redemption, just recognition of what I threw away. I hope someday to be worth the love you wasted on me. Your son, if I can still claim that title, Ryan. I read it twice, then filed it away. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe forgiveness would come with decades and distance. But trust that died the day he chose Madison over mother. Life moved forward. I remarried at 70. Not Daniel returned from the dead that was creative fiction born from wedding chaos, but Samuel Chen, a widower who'd lost his wife to similar schemers. We understood each other's scars, building love on foundations of shared survival. The ranch sign did change, though, not to Phoenix Ranch. Instead, it reads, Mitchell Ranch where integrity grows. Every spring, I plant new roses, where Ryan took his first steps, beauty blooming from betrayal's ashes. My story became a cautionary tale told in retirement communities and widow support groups. Check Your Prenup, Son evolved into a rallying cry for women refusing to be victims. We learned to spot the signs: the two charming children, the sudden interest in finances, the gradual isolation from support systems. But the greatest lesson: that mothers aren't martyrs, obligated to accept abuse. Our love doesn't require us to enable those who would harm us, even when they share our blood. Sometimes the most maternal act is letting children face consequences, protecting ourselves from those who see our affection as weakness. I stand now on my porch watching hawks circle overhead. One might be the bird Ryan saved years ago, though I'll never know for sure. Like my son, it became something beyond my influence, soaring on currents I can't control. The difference: the hawk never pretended love while sharpening its talons for my throat. To every mother reading this, you deserve respect, safety, and dignity in your golden years. Your sacrifices earned appreciation, not exploitation. If anyone makes you feel otherwise, remember my story. Remember the Phoenix Network. Remember that you can rise from ashes of betrayal stronger than before. Trust your instincts, document everything, and when necessary, choose justice over blood. Because real love doesn't require you to be a victim. And sometimes the most powerful 4 words aren't, "I love you too," but simply, "Check your prenup, son." What would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted Ryan immediately or played the long game like I did? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider sharing it with others who might need to hear its message. Like this video if you believe in justice for elder abuse victims, and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and triumph. Together, we can ensure no mother suffers in silence. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to justice. Remember, your worth isn't measured by what others can take from you, but by what you refuse to surrender. Stay strong, stay smart, and above all, stay true to yourselves. Until next time, this is Dawn Mitchell Chen reminding you that the best revenge isn't served cold, it's served with legal documentation and federal witness protection. May you all find the strength to protect what's yours, and the wisdom to know when love requires letting go.